The board game Monopoly was designed by a socialist to teach children why capitalism fails, but it didn't stay a warning. It was stolen, rebranded, and sold to millions of families who learned exactly what she intended. The irony is almost too perfect. Welcome back to Past to Profit, where history meets money. Every family has a Monopoly story, the game that starts with laughter and ends with someone flipping the board in rage. The friend who owns Boardwalk and Park Place, collecting rent while everyone else slowly goes bankrupt. The brutal lesson is clear. Once someone gets ahead, the game becomes impossible for everyone else. You probably thought it was just a game about real estate and dice rolls, but Monopoly was never meant to be fun. It was political propaganda, a warning about the dangers of land, monopolies, and concentrated wealth, and the fact that it became the best-selling board game in history, played by over 1 billion people, means the lesson worked, just not the way anyone expected. To understand why Monopoly exists, we need to go back to 1903, to a woman most people have never heard of, Elizabeth Magie. Magie was a stenographer, a writer, a comedian, and a fierce advocate for economic reform. She lived in a time when wealth inequality in America was exploding, the Gilded Age. Robber barons like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt controlled entire industries, railroads, oil fields, steel mills, massive amounts of land, all under their control. Meanwhile, ordinary workers lived in poverty, 12-hour shifts, no benefits, no safety regulations, and no matter how hard they worked, they could never catch up. Because the system wasn't designed for them to catch up, Magie was influenced by the ideas of Henry George, an economist who argued that land ownership was the root of inequality. George believed land, unlike other property, wasn't created by humans. It existed before people. So when wealthy individuals claimed ownership of vast territories, they weren't creating value. They were extracting it from everyone else. George proposed a single tax on land values to break up these monopolies and distribute wealth more fairly. His book, Progress in Poverty, published in 1879, became one of the best-selling books of the era. Millions read it, and Elizabeth Magie was one of them. She wanted to spread George's ideas, but lectures and pamphlets only reached people who were already interested. She needed something more engaging, something that could teach the lesson without feeling like a lesson. So, she invented a board game in 1903. Magie created the Landlord's game. It had 2 sets of rules. One set followed monopolist principles. Players competed to bankrupt each other by accumulating property and charging rent. The winner took everything. The second set followed Henry George's philosophy. All rent collected went into a public treasury, and wealth was distributed more evenly. Players prospered together instead of destroying each other. Magie's goal was simple: show the difference. Under monopolist rules, the game was ruthless and frustrating. Under cooperative rules, everyone had a chance to succeed. She wanted people, especially children, to experience firsthand how economic systems shape behavior. She even said in an interview, "It is a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences." In 1904, Magie received a patent for the Landlord's game. She sold a few copies, but it never became a hit. Instead, it spread informally. College students played it. Quaker communities modified it. Homemade versions appeared with different street names and house rules. Over the next 30 years, the game evolved. People added their own twists. Someone added the idea of building houses and hotels. Someone else introduced bankruptcy. The original cooperative rules were largely forgotten. Players wanted the competitive version. It's the one where you crushed your opponents. By the 1920s and 30s, the game had spread across the eastern United States. And that's when Charles Darrow enters the story. Darrow was an unemployed salesman during the Great Depression. In 1933, a friend taught him a version of the Landlord's game that used Atlantic City street names. He loved it. He saw commercial potential. He made his own version, changed a few details, and in 1935, he sold it to Parker Brothers, the toy company, as his own invention. He called it Monopoly. Parker Brothers bought the rights, marketed it aggressively, and Monopoly became a massive success. It was one of the best-selling games of the Depression era. Families who had no money in real life could at least pretend to be real estate tycoons on a board. Charles Darrow became a millionaire. He was celebrated as the inventor. Parker Brothers promoted him as a rags to riches story, the unemployed man who created a game in his basement and became rich. The ultimate capitalist fairy tale. But there was a problem. Charles Darrow didn't invent Monopoly. Elizabeth Magie did. When Parker Brothers discovered earlier versions of the game existed, they tracked down Magie. By this point, She was in her 70s, still believing in the educational purpose of her game. Parker Brothers offered her $500 for the patent to the Landlord's game. No royalties, no recognition, just a one-time payment. She accepted, thinking the company would use the game to promote economic reform instead. Parker Brothers buried her version and promoted Darrow's. They wanted the monopolist rules only, the competitive, cutthroat version, the one that made people fight. Elizabeth Magie died in 1948, largely forgotten. Charles Darrow was credited as the sole inventor for decades. It wasn't until the 1970s, when a legal dispute over monopoly's origins surfaced, that Magie's role became known. And even then, most people still don't know her name. Here's the irony. Magie created a game to critique capitalism and teach people about the dangers of monopolies. Her game was stolen, rebranded, turned into the best-selling board game in history, making Parker Brothers and Charles Darrow extremely wealthy. Through, you guessed it, monopolistic practices. The system she critiqued used her own creation against her. But here's the deeper irony. The game still works. It still teaches the lesson she intended, just not the way she imagined. Think about how Monopoly actually plays. In the beginning, everyone starts equal. Same amount of money, same opportunities. The board is open, but within a few trips around the board, inequality emerges. Someone buys Boardwalk. Someone else gets Park Place. Luck plays a role, but so does strategy. And once a player controls a monopoly, a full set of properties, the game tips in their favor. They build houses, then hotels. Rent skyrockets. Other players land on those properties and lose chunks of money. They mortgage their own properties to survive. Take desperate risks, but mathematically, the game is already over. The player with the monopoly will win. It's just a matter of time, and the losing players feel it. Frustration, helplessness, the realization that no matter how smart they play, they can't overcome the structural advantage someone else has locked in. That's not a flaw in the game. That's the point. Monopoly teaches you that once wealth concentrates, the system locks. The rich get richer not because they're smarter or work harder, but because they own the board. Everyone else is just paying rent. That's exactly what Elizabeth Magie wanted people to feel. The unfairness, the inevitability, the way capitalism, without checks, creates a feedback loop where advantage compounds and opportunity disappears, and it worked. Every person who has ever raged quit Monopoly. Every family argument, every flipped board, is proof that the game exposes something true about economic systems. You're not supposed to enjoy losing at Monopoly. You're supposed to hate it. And in hating it, you're supposed to ask, why is the system designed this way? But here's the problem. Most people stop at the emotion. They feel the frustration, pack up the game, and move on. They don't connect it to real life. They don't see that the same dynamics play out in housing markets, wages, corporate consolidation, and wealth distribution. In the real world, once someone owns enough assets, they generate passive income, rent, dividends, interest, capital gains. That income allows them to buy more assets, which generate more income, which buys more assets. It's the same loop as Monopoly, just slower and harder to see. Meanwhile, people without assets pay rent, take loans, and work for wages. Moving around the board, landing on properties they'll never own, handing money to people who got there first. And just like in the game, hard work and intelligence matter, but they can't overcome structural inequality. You can be the smartest player at the table, but if someone else owns all the properties, you're going to lose. Elizabeth Magie understood this in 1903. She built a game to make it obvious, and a century later it's still obvious. We just choose not to see it. Now, let's talk about what happened after Monopoly became a global phenomenon, because the story gets even stranger. Parker Brothers, and later Hasbro, which bought Parker Brothers, in 1991 spent decades defending their monopoly on Monopoly. They sued countless imitators, aggressively protected trademarks, used legal power to crush competitors, independent creators, anyone who tried to make a similar game. In other words, they used monopolistic business practices to control a game that was designed to criticize monopolies. The irony is cosmic, and it gets better. Monopoly has been adapted into thousands of versions. Every city, every brand, every pop culture franchise, Star Wars Monopoly, Disney Monopoly, Fortnite Monopoly. These aren't parodies or critiques. They're products, cash grabs. Hasbro licenses the Monopoly brand to anyone willing to pay, turning a game about the dangers of corporate greed into a vehicle for corporate greed. Elizabeth Magie wanted to teach people to question the system. Instead, the system turned her game into a product that reinforces consumerism. But despite all of this, despite the theft, the commercialization, the irony, monopoly still does what it was designed to do. It still makes people uncomfortable. It still exposes the mechanics of wealth concentration. It still ends in frustration and resentment. And maybe that's why it endures. Not because it's fun, but because it's honest. It doesn't lie about how winner-take-all systems work. It shows you, and once you've felt it, once you've experienced the helplessness of paying rent to someone who already owns everything, you can't unsee it. So the next time you play Monopoly and someone dominates the board, remember this. You're not just playing a game. You're experiencing a lesson a socialist woman designed over a century ago to make you angry at capitalism. And if you feel that anger, if you question why the game is designed to make losing inevitable, then Elizabeth Magie succeeded. Even if history forgot her name, the system that stole her game couldn't steal her message, because the message is in the mechanics. And every time someone plays, every time someone loses, every time someone flips the board in frustration, her lesson spreads. Monopoly wasn't invented to entertain you. It was invented to radicalize you. And in a strange, twisted way, it still does. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. And on Past to Profit, we'll show you where to look.